Watch it, Alan. I'm shooting.
Welcome back to my channel, everybody, and my continued salute to Troma Entertainment. For the next few weeks leading up to the release of the new Toxic Avenger on August 29th, I am going to be celebrating Troma films and Troma Entertainment. I love Troma movies, I love supporting independent cinema, so this was the perfect time to talk about and celebrate one of my favorite production companies. So, as you can see by the title of this video, we are talking about my top 10 favorite Troma films, Part 1. Now, there's a reason I separated this into two parts. Troma has made some amazing, over-the-top, wacky, gory, bad taste movies, but they've also distributed a lot of movies, a lot of independent films directed and produced by other people. So, I am separating this into two separate lists. I'm going to be doing my top 5 in-house Troma movies, and in the next video we're going to do my top 5 out-house Troma movies. Now, something I want to say that I've said in a previous video, the term in-house Troma movies and out-house Troma movies, I got that from Rob of Exploitation Reviews. Check out his channel, he does a lot of great stuff, and he touches on a lot of great exploitation movies that not a lot of other people talk about, so please go check him out. But anyway, I am kind of taking his idea here because a few years ago he talked about his top 20 favorite Troma movies, and he did his top 10 favorite in-house Troma movies, and then his top 10 favorite out-house Troma movies. So I'm kind of doing the same thing, but just a little different. I'm lowering it to 10 Troma films for each category, and separating them into two videos, you know, top 5 in-house and then next video top 5 out-house, because I do tend to ramble on and on and on, and if this were a top 20 video, it would go on for days. So, I just thought it would be fun, that way I can also separate it into two separate videos. So today, we are talking about my top 10 favorite in-house Troma movies, and then the next week we will talk about my favorite out-house Troma films. And before we get into the list, I just want to mention that I've said numerous times that The Toxic Avenger is my favorite Troma movie, it's my favorite superhero movie, it's one of my favorite movies of all time. So for the sake of not being too predictable, I decided not to include The Toxic Avenger on this list. And don't worry, I'm putting it high above the other movies on this list, but you know, I just didn't want the list to be too predictable, and so it makes it a little more fun when you don't really know what's coming next. So, yes, Toxic Avenger, favorite Troma movie, but now we're going to do my top 5 favorite in-house Troma films, so let's get into the list. Starting off at number 5, we have Sergeant Kabuki Man, NYPD. I've always had a soft spot for Sergeant Kabuki Man. This spot almost went to Citizen Toxie, The Toxic Avenger 4. It would have been an excuse to get The Toxic Avenger on this list, but after I really stopped and thought about it, as fun as Citizen Toxie is, I like Sergeant Kabuki Man just a little bit more, but Citizen Toxie would be a very close number 6 in this ranking. But Sergeant Kabuki Man, in a way, is a lighter form of The Toxic Avenger, because Sergeant Kabuki Man is also a superhero movie, and of course The Toxic Avenger is a very violent superhero movie. There is still violence in Sergeant Kabuki Man, just not to the same extent as The Toxic Avenger. But both movies have that sense of violence and that sense of lightheartedness, which is a hard balance to get in many movies, which is captured perfectly in The Toxic Avenger, and I do think it's captured very well in Sergeant Kabuki Man. Both movies know that they're just fun. They're fun movies. One is a little more gory than the other, but Sergeant Kabuki Man is still a blast. The basic plot is you have this New York detective who is instilled with the powers of Kabuki Man, and he goes around fighting crime throughout the city. You do have the first Kabuki Man transformation, which is a lot of fun, this big fight scene in the park, and it shows you his wacky Kabuki powers. And then there is a space before his next Kabuki Man transformation, because this is basically an origin story of this superhero. This detective who becomes Kabuki Man and then learns how to embrace the powers of Kabuki Man and become this new hero. So it is an origin story of a superhero, but it is a fun, schlocky superhero origin story. I love the design of Kabuki Man. It's bright, it's colorful, it's silly in its own way. Because there's a lot of bright colors in Kabuki, from what I understand. I haven't seen too much Kabuki, but from what I know, there is a lot of bright colors in Kabuki, and so I like how there's a lot of bright colors in the design of Sergeant Kabuki Man's costume. Now, you do have your bad taste humor in this film, not nearly as much as other Troma films, so if you go into this one, the humor may not be on the same raunchy level as other Troma films, but it's still a lot of fun. I think Sergeant Kabuki Man is a good gateway to Troma films, to just show some of your friends so they get a taste of what Troma is. Just because not everybody is used to the kind of raunchy humor, the kind of bad taste humor, the kind of nudity, and the kind of gore that a typical Troma film throws at you. So I think Sergeant Kabuki Man is a good introduction to Troma films. This and The Toxic Avenger, because it's The Toxic Avenger. But yeah, Sergeant Kabuki Man, if you want something that still has its violence but on a slightly lighter level, then this is a fun movie to check out, you know. And I love Sergeant Kabuki Man. I'm not ashamed to admit it. I am a fan of this movie. Yeah, Sergeant Kabuki Man. It's just a fun movie. Number 4 brings us to Poultrygeist: Night of the Chicken Dead. It kind of broke my heart to not put Poultrygeist in the top 3, but there is another movie that I like a little more than this one. But Poultrygeist is so over the top, so wacky, that I can't help but love it. Something that I love to praise in movies, whether it's an independent movie or a big budget studio film, is when a movie takes advantage of its idea. Whether it's a simple idea, a complex idea, a goofy idea, an all-out wacky idea, or even an idea that when you hear it and you think about it, it sounds really stupid. I respect when a movie just goes with it and goes all out with its idea. Poultrygeist: Night of the Chicken Dead is a perfect example of that kind of movie. This is a comedy, because most Troma films are comedy, or at least comedic in many ways. So it has comedic moments, and it's also a zombie film and a musical. You got a zombie film and a musical mixed together in this pile of insanity that in many ways has to be seen to be believed. Last week I did a ranking of my top 10 favorite kills in Troma movies, and I won't say where, but Poultrygeist made it onto the list. If you have not seen that video, please check it out. I had a lot of fun making that one. But anyway, so Poultrygeist is about chicken zombies. And yes, that idea sounds stupid, and it is. And that's why I love it so much, because it just goes with that idea. You have this like fast food, Colonel Sanders style chicken restaurant that you have this group that's protesting it because of the cruelty that is said to happen there, and then you have this guy who starts working at the chicken restaurant. The funny thing is, a lot of the names in this movie are taken from the names of fast food. So, like, our main character is called Arby's. You have a character called Wendy. You have a character called Denny. Like I said, it goes all out with its idea, as ridiculous as it is, and I love it for that. And it does have a lot in it. You know, you have scenes of lesbianism. You have nudity in this. You have a guy who is turned on by chickens. And so you have a fair amount of raunchy humor in here and a fair amount of bad taste humor. Whereas Sergeant Kabuki Man was a little lighter on that stuff. Poultrygeist goes all out with the Troma staple of nudity, raunchiness, violence, and schlock and bad taste humor. But it's just so fun, and I have to say the musical side of it, as goofy as it is, there's like one or two moments where I think it doesn't fit, but there are plenty of moments that I thought were legitimately good as a musical. You know, this is a low-budget movie done independently, and some of the songs are actually pretty catchy, and they're catchy and schlocky at the same time. There is a cheesiness to them, where it's just like, okay, this is weird with how this song is going, but it works. It works for this film because this movie knows what it is. It's trying to give you a schlocky, gory, raunchy good time. And like I said, it just goes with the theme of chicken zombies. It does take a while to actually get to the chicken zombies, but there is so much happening in between, and there's such a good build-up to the chicken zombies that you are not disappointed. And then when we get to the point where we have the chicken zombies, the movie goes nuts. The kills are absolutely insane. I don't want to get into too much detail of it because I do not want to spoil it in this video. Like I said, it is a movie that has to be seen to be believed. But I do think that there is a sequence in this film that's about on the same level as the lawnmower scene from Dead Alive, aka Brain Dead. If you're a horror fan and a gore fan, you know the lawnmower scene in Dead Alive, and all the crazy gore effects around that. I do put Poultrygeist about on that level with how crazy it gets with its gore and how crazy it gets with its kills in this sequence. When we get to the moments where the chicken zombies finally rise up, it is just absolute wonderful insanity from that point to the end of the film. Every Troma fan will admit that Troma movies are not for everybody, so Poultrygeist might not be everyone's taste, but if you have a group of friends who you think will enjoy this movie, show it to them. And like if you have friends that are into these kinds of movies and the kind of movies you like, have a movie night and just watch the movie, and then when it gets to the crazy scenes, just watch their expression of the movie, because you guarantee that you will get some looks on their faces because they won't be able to believe what they're seeing. And of course, enjoy the movie yourself. I mean, yeah. And watch this movie with some fried chicken, because I think that would make the viewing experience even funnier. But that's just how my weird sense of humor goes. Poultrygeist, Night of the Chicken Dead, a movie that has this silly, goofy, and I'll admit stupid idea and just runs with it. And it is wonderful because of it. I love this movie. I have so much respect for this movie for just going full force with its weird ideas. I do think Poultrygeist is a masterpiece in its own way. I love Poultrygeist. It is a raunchy, schlocky, gory, zombie chicken masterpiece. At number 3, we have Class of Nuke High. Class of Nuke High is a cult classic, and I absolutely adore this film. And I do think that Sergeant Kabuki Man is a good gateway to Troma movies, and I feel the same way about Class of Nuke High. It does have plenty of its bad taste humor, and it does have gore. The gore mostly happens in the third act. But Class of Nuke High, whereas so many Troma films, it's understandable that they're not for everybody because of the raunchy humor, because of the bad taste humor, because of how it's handled. Class of Nuke High, I honestly think, is probably the Troma film that anyone can watch, and I think anyone can enjoy. The movie takes place at Tromaville High School, which is conveniently or inconveniently located near a nuclear power plant. There's a leak at the nuclear power plant, the toxic waste makes it to the high school, and hijinks ensue. Now, one of the things that the toxic waste allegedly does is it turns members of the Honor Society into this crazed biker gang. Now, this happens before the events of the film. We don't see the Honor Society turn into this biker gang. I don't think we really need to. I mean, like, it would be nice if we did. We get something like that in one of the sequels, Return to Nuke High Part 1. Those are also great movies. I recommend Return to Nuke High Part 1 and Part 2. I recommend both of them, but they didn't quite make it into the top 5. But, you know, going back to Nuke High, so this is like a high school movie mixed with a biker gang film that turns into a monster movie. There are elements in this movie that are similar to the Toxic Avenger, but I do think it's different enough from the Toxic Avenger that it stands on its own. You know, Toxic Avenger is great, and there are some elements of the Toxic Avenger in Class of Nuke 'Em High, but I do think it stands on its own as its own movie, and it's really good. But you have a lot of fun stuff in here. You have stuff that you see in high school movies, just done with a Troma flair, with that element of toxic waste doing to people what toxic waste does to people in B movies. You know, like, toxic waste in movies is kind of magical in this weird, creepy, messed up way. Just, you know, doing things to people, giving them powers, deforming them in weird ways and stuff like that. Which is fun, you know, that's the kind of stuff we love to see in B movies. You know, toxic waste did so much in 50s B movies. Toxic Waste created superheroes in comic books, and it does some fun stuff in Class of Nuke 'Em High. And my favorite element is, and this is a somewhat of a spoiler, but you can read about it on the back of the box, this woman who is succumbed to the toxic waste becomes pregnant with this mutated fetus. She spits up the mutated fetus, and throughout the rest of the film, it starts growing into this monster, and then we get to the third act of the film, where the biker gang is wrecking the high school, is terrorizing our two main characters, and then the deformed fetus mutates into this monster that rises out of its barrel and starts wreaking havoc in the school and killing off members of the biker gang. That is a mild spoiler, but it does say this at the back of the box. Now, it is important to understand that the monster fetus doesn't really become the monster until, like, the third act, like maybe the last 20 minutes or so, give or take. And that's one of the only reasons why Class of Nuke 'Em High isn't quite higher on the list. It's a great movie, but this monster is so good, and I wish it were in more of the film. Not necessarily the entire film, but a little more of the movie, and then I think it would have been a little higher. But the monster action we get in this movie is awesome, and the monster looks absolutely fantastic. There are some kills in this movie that are great. I talk about them in my previous video of my top 10 favorite Troma kills, so please go check that out. I'm not spoiling them here. You can watch that, me shamelessly whoring myself out. But the effects work is really good, and the monster's fantastic. I love the design of this monster. But the biker gang stuff is a lot of fun. Seeing how people are affected by the toxic waste, it's so much fun. It's just, I say this about a lot of Troma movies, but it's just all around they're all around fun movies. I've heard people say that Class of Nuke 'Em High is their favorite Troma film, and I can completely understand why. It doesn't quite make it higher on the list than where it is for me, but it's still a fantastic film that I would recommend to everybody. If you want to show your friends a Troma movie and you want to have a movie night and show them a Troma film, I do think Class of Nuke 'Em High is the perfect choice for that. It's got so much fun throughout the film, it's very well done, and you have a great monster in the third act. So yes, Class of Nuke 'Em High, for me, I think this is a perfect introduction for those just getting into Troma films. Now, when we get to the top two on this list, since the Toxic Avenger is being kept off the list for reasons that I said before, the final two spots, these are movies that I've gone back and forth on so many times over which one I like more, so this was difficult to do. But when I stopped and thought about it, this was the order, you know, this movie at number 2, this movie at number 1. So as hard as it was for me to do this, this is the final count. So at number 2, we have Terror Firmer. This is one of those movies, like, you have movies that, when you rank your favorite films of some kind, you have a movie that gets to a certain spot on the list, but the more you watch it, it gets higher and higher and higher on the list. You know, you start loving it more and more the more you watch it, and that is Terror Firmer for me. I love Terror Firmer so much. I've talked about it many times on this channel. I'll probably talk about it many more times on this channel, so I'm going to apologize if I'm repetitive in this segment, but I can't help it. I love Terror Firmer. Class of Nuke 'Em High, I think, is the best introduction to Troma films. And The Toxic Avenger is my favorite Troma movie. But if I had to pick the movie that I think represents Troma the most, it would be Terra Firma. All the elements that you see in so many Troma films are in Terra Firma. And it truly is a love letter to independent cinema and independent filmmaking. As much as I understand that Troma films are not for everybody, I think anybody that wants to make their own movie independently or with their own money, whether they have a decent budget or no budget, I know what that's like, I think they should watch Terra Firma, because that's what Terra Firma is about. It's about all the difficulties and everything that can go wrong and the chaos involved in making an independent movie just taken to a violent extreme. But this is a slasher movie, and honestly, like, the more I've watched it, it's become one of my favorite slasher films. I don't know if it would make it in my top 10 favorite slasher films, but honestly, I think it would at least make it in my top 15. It is a comedy. There is some wacky kills in this movie, but it is mostly a comedy with raunchy, offensive humor. But anyway, so Terra Firma is about the making of an independent movie. It is a Troma film. The people in this movie are making a Troma film, and so much stuff is going wrong on set as they're making this movie, and there is a killer going around killing people who are part of the making of this film. This is a movie that does not care who it offends. It does not care about its bad taste humor, and it works because it goes after everybody. I would put this up there with something like South Park, a TV show that goes after everyone, and people love it for that. It's like, okay, yeah, it's making fun of everybody, and that's what this film does. I talk about it all the time, but there is a difference between good bad taste and bad taste, and one of the important elements of good bad taste is making fun of everybody, not just going after one specific group. Because when you're doing that, you're just being an asshole. You're just attacking one particular group. You're not punching up, you're punching down when you're going after one group. When you're making fun of everybody, it's like you're making fun of everyone together, and that can work. It's like when you feel comfortable to make fun of each other and make fun of everyone all together, in a weird way it kind of brings people together. It's like, oh yeah, we can all laugh at ourselves and laugh at our flaws and stuff like that. But yes, it's important to make fun of everybody, and it is important to understand the difference between good bad taste and bad taste. And I do think that Terra Firma is a great example of good bad taste. A quote from this film that I use all the time, and it's one of my favorite movie quotes, and I do think it has relevance: sometimes pissing people off is the only way to get them to look at something. And that is true in many ways. How many times have you not really paid attention to something until something happened that got you pissed off about it? That's the importance of it. But anyway, moving on, let me get off this soapbox here. I love how it celebrates independent filmmaking. There's a guy in this film who is the very clean-cut guy, and usually he would be the protagonist in other movies, but he's sort of the antagonist in this film. He says that if you don't have the money, don't make the movie. He comes across as this clean-cut individual, and you have all these degenerates around him, and as the movie goes on, you realize you're not rooting for the clean-cut guy, you're rooting for all the degenerates around him. The degenerates of this film are basically the good guys, because they're the ones fighting for independent cinema and independent art and stuff like that, whereas the clean-cut guy is only watches mainstream movies and only thinks that, mainstream films and stuff like that are art in that way, which is an interesting way to look at it. And I do want to repeat myself, I don't like trashing mainstream cinema. There's a lot of great stuff that we have gotten from mainstream movies, but I do think it's very important to support independent cinema, because that's where a lot of the new stuff and the originality comes from. Anybody who says, if you don't have the money, don't make the movie, I highly disagree with that. I want everybody to make their own movies regardless of their budget. But that's one of the reasons why I love Terra Firma so much. Not only does it just go there with its crazy kills and its gritty humor, but it celebrates independent cinema. And that's one of the reasons why this movie has come to mean so much to me. So yeah, Terra Firma, great great Troma film, and a fun, over-the-top comedic slasher movie. You know, I would say that this would at the very least be in my top 15 slasher movies. And that brings us to our number 1 spot. This is a movie that I absolutely love, and it's right behind, it is number 1 here, and it is, the more I think about it and the more I thought about it, it is like right behind the Toxic Avenger for my favorite horror movie, my favorite Troma movie. So yes, at number 1 we have Tromeo and Juliet. When I first went into Tromeo and Juliet, I did not know what I was going to think of it. It's like, okay, it's Troma's version of Romeo and Juliet. You know, I know it's going to be gory, I know it's going to be raunchy, I know it's going to be filled with nudity, but I didn't know what to expect. It's like, okay, are we just going to get Romeo and Juliet, just a little more violent and a little more gritty? No, not at all. Tromeo and Juliet is a great movie. It's a love story, and that's one of the things I love about it. Like, with all the other Troma films out there, you either get a gory horror comedy, weird over-the-top, gory, low-budget action movie, but while there is action and stuff in Tromeo and Juliet at its core is a love story, which makes sense because Romeo and Juliet is a love story. And the movie is filled with that punk rock attitude, which I absolutely adore. One of the first things you see while watching this movie is a woman getting her nipple pierced, and they show it. Now, I'm fine with nipple rings, I just can't see them happening. Like, nipple torture is something that really gets to me, so there's few things that happen on screen that I have to look away from, but nipple torture is something where I get squeamish and I want to look away. Seeing a nipple actually getting pierced, I have a hard time watching. Like I said, the nipple piercing itself, while it's not happening, when it's done, I'm fine with, but seeing it happen really hits me hard. But that's one of the reasons why I loved this movie. It's like, oh wow, that's what they're giving you very close to the beginning, and it gives you a taste of what kind of movie you're in for. This punk rock version of Romeo and Juliet. Tromeo and Juliet does have some good kills in it. It's not known for its kills as much as other Troma films, but it does have some good kills in it. But for the most part, like I said, this is a love story, and I think it's a damn good love story, and I'm not ashamed to admit it. In terms of romance films, because this is kind of a romance film, I think this is one of my favorite ones, but then again, you know what kind of guy I am. I love B-movies, Grindhouse movies, exploitation films, horror movies. So yeah, of course, this is the kind of love story I'm gonna gravitate to. And there is a good amount of nudity in this flick, and you know, I have no problem with nudity in my movies. You know, regardless of it's a man or a woman or anything in between, I don't care who gets naked on film. It's something that I respect when an actor has the courage to get naked on camera. And I think too many people have gotten afraid of the naked human body nowadays anyway. But anyway, it embraces its raunchiness. It embraces the sexuality of these characters. It embraces its nudity. It embraces its punk rock attitude. There's just so many elements of Tromeo and Juliet that mix together so well. And there's a sequence in here, I did talk about it in a previous video, so I don't want to spoil it here, but it's this really weird scene that is messed up, but also beautiful in many ways. It happens towards the third act, and it involves Juliet taking some kind of elixir, and something happens. If you've seen the movie, you know what I'm talking about, but you know, there's a sequence that happens beforehand, and then there's a moment between Tromeo and Juliet in this sequence, after the elixir is taken and things happen, that is really messed up, but I found kind of beautiful in some way. It's basically, not to spoil too much, but it was a revelation that Tromeo loved Juliet for her, not for her looks, which I thought was kind of beautiful in a way for a love story, you know? But yeah, I mean, I don't know what else to really say about Tromeo and Juliet without spoiling too much. I know I'm repeating myself, but it has that punk rock attitude mixed with this love story, mixed with all the raunchiness and grittiness that you see, and violence that you see in a Troma film, and just mixes them so well together. Tromeo and Juliet is a fantastic movie, in my opinion, and I genuinely think it's a fantastic love story for the people who, especially for people who have a hard time getting into love stories. Like, if you want to see more of a punk rock kind of attitude, kind of romance film, this is the one for you. And yes, while The Toxic Avenger is my favorite Troma film, Tromeo and Juliet is a very close second, and it makes the #1 spot on this list. And that's it for the first part of this top 10 list. So in the next video, we're going to do my top 5 favorite outhouse Troma films, so stay tuned for that one. I just thought it would be better to split these up into 2 movies, so that way I'm not rambling along for too long, because I do ramble on these lists, and if there were a top 10 list, then this is going to be a very long video. But anyway, thank you all so much for watching. Please let me know your favorite Troma film down below if you're a Troma fan. If you're not a Troma fan, let me know if I've gotten you curious in checking out some Troma movies. And if you're not a Troma fan, then leave it down in the comments below your favorite B-movie, your favorite low-budget, kind of crazy B-movie. You know, everybody's welcome in the conversation here. But yeah, my fellow Troma fans unite, and my fellow horror fans and B-movie fans unite, and check out some Troma films if I've piqued your curiosity. But on that note, stay tuned for the second half of this list, where I talk about my favorite outhouse Troma movies. Again, I want to give a thanks to Exploitation Reviews, Rob from Exploitation Reviews, for being an inspiration for the list here and how I did this list. I know it's not exactly the same, but the idea was taken from your list of Troma movies. But anyway, thank you, Rob from Exploitation Reviews, for inspiring me to do this list the way I'm doing it. And thank you all for continuing to watch and support this channel. It does truly mean a lot to me. Thank you all so much for taking time out of your day to watch these little videos I do on the internet. But, yeah. Tune in for the next video, and until next time, this is the Maniac, here to remind you that the Grindhouse will never die. And long live Troma Entertainment.